Hello, this is Christian. In this video, I'm going to cover the class component or the stateful component in React. So back here in the IDE, earlier in the previous video, we did a function component that we're going to leave this as is. I'm called from the demo folder. Inside the demo, I have this app.js that uses a function component, and I try to update the data in the view by clicking a button to update the data, and we saw that it did not work unless I used the traditional method to do that, to update the DOM, and that's how it works in function. So now let's look at a class component. Okay, so a class component, before I do this, I'm going to just use a single one here, but I'm going to just do a skeleton of it so you can kind of see what it is. Okay, it looks like this, a class called app, and just for this example, I'm just going to call it, I'm going to rename this to just app1 for now. App, and then I need to extend the React component, parent component. And then if it's going to be a view, I must have the render function and return a view. That's just the rule. Okay, if I use this class to instantiate some other objects for some other reasons, and I'm not going to use that to render a view, then this is not required. If you do, then you have to put that there, and it follows the same rule as before, right? H1 or whatever it is, you put some stuff in there. As you can see, this is a typical view inside a React. So I can put like message here, some text, doesn't matter, right? So if I save this, and now because I'm exporting only this app and not this one, it's going to use this class to put this message to the browser. So if you run the app, you should see something like this in the message view I showed you earlier here. So there's the message, right? It uses the one I just created to point the message here. Okay? So now I'm going to convert this function to a class. Follow this kind of similar syntax here. So I'm going to terminate this off. Okay, comment that out. And actually, I'm going to remove it completely entirely. And so I'm going to change this to app, and we'll convert it to a class. So we'll call class here, and then we'll put extends the React component. And then inside here, I no longer have to put. So put is going to be my state data because I want to update this. So that means I have to use like state.put point. And this way I can't do that, so I'm going to put a constructor. And inside a constructor, you pass the word props. You have to do that because sometimes you receive the data from the parent, because this can be a child component, actually, right? So, and then a rule, again, you pass the props to the parent, which is in this case the component here. And so if this point is a state, then usually you do it this way. Inside the constructor, you put this dot state. This is the state object, and equals over here is a property. The property is called point, and it's initialized to 10, right? So now instead of putting out here, I put it inside a constructor. Now I'm managing this state here. This state has a property called point. And now because it's a class, this function, I can't put function here, okay? I just have to be like just like that. And you see a bunch of errors down here because now I'm returning some view, so I have to put a render function here. And then wrap the whole thing inside there, right? So you can grab this or put that curly in the bottom, and you have to wrap it inside the render function. So here we go. We have the return and side here. And I'm just going to clean it a little bit. Okay, so this is our view. I'm just going to collapse this. Okay, so this is the function, a class component now. Now, when you reference these data, like the point here, you have to go through this state object. So like down here, I cannot just do that. If I do that in same thing here, right? If you think about back to your traditional object-oriented programming paradigm, a variable here, you must access it through the this object, right? So same thing here. If I update this, you'll do something. So I'm going to do a little bit different here because this one won't work in React the way I will have it here. Okay, I mean, it does work, but that's not how you do it. This is the traditional way to do it. This is how you update data. And so in here, instead of point, I have to say this point, this state dot point. So if we just run as it is, you see that you usually have some bunch of error on your browser here. Point's not defined, and so on. Update me, it's not defined. Okay. So you have to kind of change these around. So that means the point here to say this dot state dot point, and this be this dot update me. Okay. And then same here as well. I have to say this dot point, state dot point. And you don't do this, okay? This is a no-no. This is called you are updating the state property by using the assignment operator. You should not do that, and I'll show you the reason why a little bit later. And this is not a good way to do it, so I'm just going to put comment that up for now. We should not do that, and we don't do this anymore because this is the other way. So basically, we're going to do the whole thing here, and I'll just print out this dot state dot point to print out to the console when I click on it. So let's save this for now, and let's see what it looks like on the browser. So here we go, back to this again, and I'll press F12 just to see the console here, make sure there are no errors. So when I click on it, it has some error, right? So it cannot read state property at line 12. So let's go back and see. Okay, let's see. Okay, well, this is a very common feature that you sometimes gonna get me every time. Okay, so every time we use a function that is connected to a property of the state, you must bind this function first. Okay, so what that means is go back in the code. So this function, because I'm updating the state, I'm using that to update the state. So therefore, I need to bind this function to the state. So I have to do something like this. So you have to say this dot update me function equals to this update me function dot bind, and then bind to this. All right. So if your function is going to be used to, update the state data in this scenario, then you must bind it. If you have 10 of them, then you do 10 of them here. Okay. If you just have another function to perform something else not related to the state, then you don't need to do that. But in this case, I do because I'm updating the state. Okay, so save this again, and let's go back and see if that's fixed. Okay, I'm going to clear the console again just to make sure, refresh it. All right, so when I click update me, okay, so you see that now at the bottom it prints 10. If I do it again, it prints 10 again. Just keep printing the same 10 number, 10, right? I just output that every time. Now let's go back and update this with a random number, right? So usually we do that. Then you can change it. Now, when you update the state and you want to change the data from 10 to a random number like this, I mentioned that you don't want to do it this way. So usually you do the other way. So let's just say if I do it this way, okay? If I update it and I change it to the new number, because of the rule of impure functions, now what I'm doing here in this scenario is it's a really tricky situation where it sometimes can lead you to really can exhaust you because you don't understand what's going on here. You forgot about it maybe because you do this assignment here. So any property in this state should not be done this way unless you have some reason why to do so. Okay, let me save this again, and so you'll see that when I update, it should change now. Go back to the browser here again and refresh it just to make sure it works. No errors. Okay, so when I click my update, notice again that it changes to 4, but the view does not change. 8, and so on, right? So this is why you don't update the actual state doing the assignment operator, because a state should modify and should change the view, because you're doing that way, then React doesn't know that the state point hasn't changed yet, and it's odd that way. So to make this work, instead of doing this way, you use a special function called setState. This function here takes an object, so the long way you would do something like state, right? And then the object like this, I mean equal to that, okay? and then inside here you put the point, and then assign to the new number. So let's say I'm going to put outside here a variable called random is equal to that, and I'll assign the new random number like that. Okay. So you can do that. So now when I make the changes to the state, as you can see, I'm reassigning, right, a property to the state. So now the state has been touched, I guess, has been changed. So when that's been changed, then because a class component has all those 7 or 8 lifecycle hooks, when that does change, then React re-renders the entire, it looks in here and make the changes, and it renders the area needs to be changed. So if I save this, go back to the browser, and I think I probably did something wrong here. 924. Let's see what I do here. Okay, I think I have a typo somewhere here maybe. So the state doesn't know this. Okay, so yeah, I probably had this wrong in a similar way, but we'll just do the short way. Just take this out and then just put inside here the object itself. Okay, we want to change just the point to the new number called rand, and let's save this again. So it doesn't really use the this.set state to change this property in here. If you have another property, you put the property here, and then you have the new value here. Okay, so let's go back and see this again. Refresh my console here. Okay, so when I update the state, you can see that now it changes, right, live, and also you can see down here it's a little bit delay, right? Then 3, and then 3 is not shown here until I click the next one. Okay, this is because you are calling this state asynchronously behind the scene, and that's why there's a tick behind it. So when I click on it, there's a little bit delay there, and so to get around it, you have to do it another way. You can call it asynchronously, but for now, I just want to show you that we update the data because the state value property has been changed. So therefore, it will look at the object in the DOM and see what's been changed, and it would update this data here. Okay, so that's all we did. And so by changing this set state from this state at point equals 2 makes that difference. By doing this way, does not re-render the DOM. By using the state, it does. Okay, and so that's something you want to keep in mind about state. And so that is the difference between a function component and a class component. Again, class component has constructor. You have the state property that is assigned to some properties, and we use a function to manipulate the state. You have to bind it in the constructor like this. The same method here in order for it to work. Okay. So that is the basic example of a class component. In the next couple of videos we'll do a combination of both of those, and we'll see how you can pass data from the parent component to the child component to either another class component or a function component, and see how those can update the state.